Latham, Selma Alarifi, Farine and Lena today, and I'm sure they'll introduce themselves a bit more when we move to them. We are recording the webinar today because we hope that'll be useful for anybody who's not able to attend today. So I hope nobody objects to that. All right, but just to let you know, we are recording it. So this is the agenda for today. So there's a short welcome from me, which is just now, and then we're going to move on to Farine, who's got a little quiz for us. And then we've got 3 showcases. So we've got one from Joe from the NU STEM at Northumbria University. We've got showcase 2, which is from Selma at Leeds. Then we're going to have a short break. We'll come back and do a little practical activity, which we hope you will find useful. And we've got a 3rd showcase from Annabelle and Keeley from Manchester. And then at the end, there's an open discussion. And really, we'd really like you as you go through today to think about some of the challenges and solutions you've had with educational outreach. And then we'd also like to think about how we might work together going forward, what might be useful. So we're going to use a Padlet to do that. So hopefully we'll have a bit of interactivity then. Pushing around all of that. So that's the agenda for today. So just a bit of welcome before I move on to Farine, just to say I sort of lead the STEM outreach group for the IEEE Women in Engineering committee, and we're really keen to see how we can work together and support this initiative about getting young people interested in science and tech and engineering and maths. Okay, so I'm going to pass on to Farine, who's got a little quiz. Farine, is that okay? I'll stop sharing my screen.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Farine Ayaz, and I'm a research fellow at University of Sussex. I work for promotions and publicity in IEEE Women in Engineering UK and Ireland group. So we'll start with the quiz that will be played on Kahoot. So all you have to do is to go to the website kahoot.it. You can, if you are viewing it from laptop, you can use another device for the Kahoot quiz so that you can have 2 screens because the questions will be displayed on my screen while you will be allowed to play on your screens. Okay. So I'll share a PIN number with you that you'll have to enter for going into the quiz. So the PIN number is 5914702. Let me share in chat. There will be only 5 questions relating to STEM history, and you'll have to answer as soon as possible because you'll be scored on the basis of how soon you answer. So I hope you can see my screen. Let's wait for a few more minutes and then we'll start. We have 9 participants here, and we have space to join one more. Yes. So, yes, we have got 11 now. Remember, you'll see questions on my screen, and you'll have to answer.
I think Fahina's got an, you're back.
So I'll have to restart because there were some problems with the connection. I'm sorry about that. Now you'll have to join again with the new PIN number, that is 8157466. Yes, thanks, Lena.
That's what happens when you use technology live, Farine.
Okay, I'll request you to join as soon as possible, and we'll start with 10 participants because okay, let's start. Who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize? Rosalind Franklin, Anne Frank, Marie Meyer, or Marie Curie? So it was Marie Curie. We have started with the easiest one. Let's see the scores. Okay, moving on to the next question. Who is the world's first computer programmer? Ada Lovelace, Charles Babbage, Neil Armstrong, or Abacus? Ada Lovelace. Yes, majority of you answered correctly, but the scores will be how soon you answer. So Norris is winning up till now. Moving on to our third question. Who is known as the father of modern computer? Charles Babbage, Newton, Einstein, or Ada Lovelace? The answer is Charles Babbage. And now this is winning again. So it's a fun and interactive quiz that's quite helpful while teaching online. Which of the following was part of research by Stephen Hawking? Nuclear energy, artificial intelligence, black hole theory, or cancer treatment? So it's black hole theory. Okay, so knowledge is on fire. Now our last question. Which semiconductor company is currently producing core line of computers? AMD, Intel Corporation, Analog Devices, or Apple? The core PCs. It's Intel. Let's see who are the winners. At third position, we have KC. Joe is second. And Sunny is first.
Yay, that's me.
Well done, everyone. So that was our quiz. Thank you, everyone who participated. That's
Thanks
it.
very much, Farine. So the idea is that was just to do a little quiz with you and just to show you the sort of tools that we can use. We got tools and stuff to open up. Okay, I'm going to pass on to Joe, who's going to talk about a new STEM.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the NU STEM group at Northumbria University. You've got me down, Becky, as the director of NU STEM. And back when we were first going to this, I was acting director. So I don't want to take the title away from Carol Davenport, who is my actual boss and the actual director of NU STEM. I'm just going to get this screen shared like that. And if someone can give me a nod that they can see what I think they can see. Brilliant. So I want to talk a little bit about the importance of evaluation in STEM outreach and engagement. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of how we do it and why we think it's important, and where it's kind of where it's really supported and helped us in terms of developing our practice. So we're an outreach and research group at Northumbria University. We've got a big vision for a vibrant and sustainable STEM sector, which meets the needs of learners and employers and reflecting the diversity of wider society. How do we go about doing this? We are different from other places in that we are looking at how do we do long-term engagement with partners. So rather than working with individual schools every now and again, or getting requests for us to go out to different schools, we only work with a set number of schools from across the Northeast. So we've got about 22 primary schools and I think 6 or 7 secondary schools at the moment. And some of those partner schools we've been working now with for 8 years. Some of them have been kind of means we can regularly see children during the course of their lifetime at the school and hopefully kind of embed some of the practices that we have within the fabric of the school building. We're guided by a theory of change, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we particularly are looking at schools in areas of socio-economic deprivation, which are particularly easy to find across a lot of the northeast of England. So I'll talk a little bit about our theory of change. We're very keen to make sure that the outreach that we do has the impact that we want it to have. Now, this will be far too small for most to read, and I can send you, there are some links later and we can send around slides and things like that. I'm going to pull out a kind of strand of it. We use this theory of change approach to take our major impact, which is what we want to happen right at the bottom here, and work out what do we think needs to happen, short-term outcomes, medium-term outcomes, long-term outcomes, in order for that big impact to happen at the end. We use this as a tool to help us map new activities to make sure we think they're doing or ticking the boxes that we think will end up with that ultimate goal. So what I've done on the next slide is, rather than you seeing all these tiny little words, I've taken out a particular set of causal links from this. So you'll see, I've just pulled this from that previous document, and at the bottom right hand of the corner, you can see that kind of big impact there, which is more people choosing a career in STEM, but also increased number of females choosing, I can't see because it puts your faces, other panelists, right on top of my screen. increased number of females choosing a STEM career, increased diversity of socio-economic background choosing a STEM career. And you can see here what I've traced through is one path through this. So we think that if we've got primary science coordinators supported to lead science within a primary school, then that will increase the primary teacher confidence of other teachers to teach STEM. And that will and part of that will be that the school environment mitigates the effect of bias and stereotypes, and that pulls forward to more people choosing STEM as a career. Now that's just one strand within that theory of change, because in that previous slide, if I can get back to it, there are lots of bits that are kind of pulled together to explain this. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our group, is trying to explore the complexity of the problem, because it is a wickedly complex problem with so many different factors influencing why a young person would choose to or not do STEM. This theory of change helps us to better understand what those pathways are and how we can influence them. So for us, why do we evaluate what we do? We want to know what works and what doesn't, so we can adapt our own practice. And that's really important for us, that we try things, we experiment, we have new ideas, but we want to know those ideas work and are worthwhile. We want to be able to confidently share that good practice, so we try and back it up by robust evidence. It assists us in planning. If we know what works, it gives us kind of better pointers about what we do next. It holds us accountable. I think this is really important for us, that when we go in and work with a school, particularly because we're working with partner schools over such a long period, we're actually taking many hours out of a child's educational life, I suppose, in primary and secondary. And we want to be sure that when we take away an hour, we use it for what we want to use it for, a STEM outreach session, that we feel that there is robust evidence for the other outcomes they're going to get within that hour. It's also quite often a funding requirement for most of our funding streams. So I want to give two examples from practice about where our evaluation has been so important. And this first one is from a set of workshops we developed 2018 called Geography Past, Present and Future. This was 3 workshops that were combined together, and some of the environmental scientists from across Northern University came out to one of our schools to do them. We had 3 different workshops, and the one you can see in the picture here, this is a bit of the UK called Mappleton. It's on the east coast, just south of Hornsea. You can see Hornsea in the background here. Mappleton is a particularly interesting place in the UK because it's a place where the coastline management plan is such that at some point in the next 50 to 100 years, Mappleton will not be there anymore because of the coastal management plan. And so our workshop was about helping children understand the role of an environmental planner. So we broadened their careers understandings and showcased this career. We ran the workshop, and we're quite confident in our ability to build and deliver good quality workshops. But what was really interesting is that, so one of our outcomes is we were expecting children to have an increased knowledge of environmental planner, but also want to be one more within a class. And that's not to say we want the whole class of 30 wanting to be environmental planners, but we were hoping that a few might. And the initial findings from that evaluative work, so the surveys that we'd built in to the actual workshop, showed that nobody, like absolutely nobody, wanted to be an environmental planner. And this was really interesting because everybody is giving us really good feedback about the workshop. They're having a great time, they're enjoying it, the activities are engaging, but nobody wants to do it as a job. And we only found that because of this evaluation strand that was in there. So when we probe this a little bit further, nobody wants to do the job because they feel that it's a life or death kind of job. Planning for environmental coastline management means that you get to decide whether someone's house falls off a cliff or not at some point. So what had happened within the workshop is we hadn't properly articulated the timescales involved. And so children thought that within the planning workshop, you make decisions that impact children tomorrow, and that if you make a decision in the environmental planner, somebody's house drops off the edge of a cliff the next day. Without our embedded evaluation model, we wouldn't have picked that up because we were getting positive feedback from the workshop. So one really good reason there, one example from our practice of evaluation been really core to providing a strong basis for why a workshop works, but also picking up why it doesn't, allowing us then to redevelop it. The second one is an activity called STEM Person of the Week that we run in schools. So you can see at our most current set here from Northumbria, where we showcase a variety of STEM people to our primary partner schools, and the children in the schools get postcards, and they kind of through these postcards meet these people and the skills and each person kind of has within the blurb that you can see written there showcase some of the skills that they use in their job. And over the course of 5 weeks, those children start to think about STEM work in terms of those 15 skills it is across the set of 5. Now, we have research and evaluation embedded into this because it's incredibly important when we've built a resource like this that takes up a significant amount of teaching time. So there is preparation involved from teachers, children are actively engaged in it for a number of hours over each week, that we want to be sure and confident that it has a positive impact. And that's partly based on the idea from before that sometimes there are unexpected impacts on what you do. So this is backed up by research. We did research that went alongside it, and I can share some of that with you. I'm just conscious of time. The next question I think is asked is how should you evaluate these kind of things? And I was talking with the rest of the team yesterday and this morning. It's really complicated because it depends on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who wants that evaluation, the funding behind that evaluation. And I think the best point here is for me to point you at other very good high quality resources at this point. If you're keen to evaluate your work, and I hopefully have shown you why there's some good reasons to do so, the National Coordinating Centre for Public Engagement, so publicengagement.ac.uk, have some fantastic evaluation tools on there, which you can embed within your own practice. So that would be the first place to go to. You're welcome to get in touch with the NU STEM team, and we can talk to you a little bit about kind of how we do things in more detail, because I'm aware this is quite a whistle-stop tour, and I've just gone over my 10 minutes. So I'll pause there, and I think that's where I'll leave it. I think that gets us to, yeah, I've got some references on a different slide, but we can send that around later, Becky, if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds great, Joe. While Joe's here, has anybody got any immediate questions? We've probably got time for a couple or two. I think you can either put them in the question and answer, or you can raise your hand, and I think I can make it. Anybody got any questions?
Keely's got one.
I've got one. Can I ask you a question? I think it'd be brilliant to look at how you evaluate. And my question is, do you evaluate in primary schools?
Yeah, most of our evaluation work is happening in primary moment. It's really challenging. A lot of our evaluation work is around careers aspirations at the moment, and some of our research as well. And as you get younger and younger, the variability in answers based upon what someone's had for breakfast suddenly changes. So as you get into secondary, we can be quite confident answers will stay the same over a period of hours. But it's interesting evaluating things, particularly with quite young children, that the fact that they had something for breakfast can influence their answer to a question about careers later on. It's a challenge. It is a challenge.
Okay. There will be a chance to ask things later too. So thank you very much, Joe, for that. Really interesting to learn about evaluation. I know it's been an interesting journey that NU STEM have been on. Okay, I'm going to pass you over to Salma, who's going to talk about her outreach activity that she's been doing, linked to her research at Leeds.
I just realized I was muted. Thank you so much, Becky, and I hope you can see my slides. I'll be talking about the work that I have done in terms of working with parents. So referring to the theory of change that Joe was talking about, my work is, if you would like, is just a step before exposure to STEM education at school, whereby the work that I do is mainly involved around involving parents of parents and carers of marginalized families to think about STEM education and involving their children with STEM, and their views on STEM careers would focus on women in engineering. Now, the theory behind my work is based on pedagogies around the importance of having science capital, and that's to do with exposure to STEM beyond the school. So activities with families, with friends, engagement with out of school activities, visiting museums, but doing the work as families. And that's what I mean by the intergenerational lens to the work. So I should have mentioned that the work that I am doing was actually part of a fellowship that I did with the University of Leeds to do with academic public engagement. So when I initially got the fellowship, my objectives were to work with families and specifically parents from marginalized families in the community, to really try to promote girls to study engineering by trying maybe to break the stereotypes, share my lived experience and share the lived experience of other women who we might have similar lived experience with those families who might be marginalized, and in aims to empower them, to encourage them to think about STEM and encourage their young girls to consider STEM. However, when I started working with families, I then realized that actually the objectives of my projects were not necessarily aligned with the needs of the groups that I was working with, which made me to rethink about the aims and objectives of the work and how I want to do it. And I mainly noticed that the needs of the groups that I was working with, and this work, by the way, was conducted in the northeast of the UK, because that's where I was living at the point when I conducted the research. I found out that the needs of the families were all centered around imposter syndrome experience that was experienced maybe by the parents, the science capital of either or both of the parents, as well as the social capital, and which might be imposed by their experience of marginalization. And I intentionally use the term marginalized or minoritized in here, because I don't refer to them just because they exist as minorities, but because of situations out of their control, they happen to be marginalized in the environments where they live in. So I then had to think about how do I best get to understand all these complexity and the complexities of the intersectional identities of their parents, and how that impacts their support and their aspirations for their children. So I thought to start off with working with parents by collecting qualitative data, just to try to pick all these points and tease out where all these stereotypical ideas or challenges are actually arising from. So I conducted a focus group with a number of parents from the families that I was working with. The focus group was mainly conducted with the mothers of the children that I was working with, and was mainly to look at trying to understand their perception of the importance of why do we need, or why does this work exist in the first instance, why there's so much work around encouraging young children to go into STEM, and in particular encouraging young girls. And I wanted to understand, are the parents aware of this work, and do they understand the need for it and its significance? And also trying to understand within the family, who do they think or believe has the direct impact on a young person's intent to maybe to decide to want to study and remain in a STEM field. So during I'm obviously aware of the time, but I just want to share some of the outcomes that came from those focus groups. And one of the key things that I discussed with the number of focus groups that I had with the mothers of the young girls was to understand their perception of the nature of engineering work. And it was quite surprising in so many ways that most of them considered engineering to be field work, work that would be related to physical activity, a male-dominated environment, which we all know. A couple of the ladies described the way a woman would dress, the clothing, the bulky shoes, the clothing as being uncomfortable. And one of the really interesting things that came across from the workshop, and this is quite interesting because the mother is actually, she has a degree in STEM background, and she was talking about how she perceives the nature of engineering as being fast changing, and it's really hard for a woman to stay up to date with that because of how fast changing the field is. And the fact that a woman might need to go into breaks in life if she wants to have children and look after them, and how that can be quite challenging for her to come back into the space. And this was quite interesting for me to hear, especially given that the parent who shared this herself was actually from STEM background. In terms of the challenges around promoting girls into engineering, there were two main really interesting points again that I concluded from the analysis of the data. First one being language barrier, and the second one being lack of understanding of the system. So the language barrier point, and that was to do with the parents and their children not speaking the same language. I should have stated at the beginning, I did work with Arabic speaking families who have immigrated to live in the UK. And the families were talking about how they got to a point where their children do not speak the level of the Arabic language, and they don't speak the same level, the same proficiency level of English that their children speak, to the point that would allow them to have an intellectual discussion around what STEM is. The second point that was raised with the parents, and this was quite interesting, especially when I was talking to them about all of the work that happens around promoting women in STEM. A lot of the parents didn't even know what was happening in school, and they didn't even know that about this skill gap, the need to promote more young children into engineering, specifically more women, to enhance the diversity of the workplace. And there was this evident gap in parents' lack of understanding of how the educational system in the UK works, which obviously links to lack of understanding or lack of even awareness about limited about all the activities that might be happening outside of the school, which can directly feed into limiting the science capital of a young person. And this, I thought this was really crucial, because despite of all of the work that the school might be doing, if the parents are not aware and not engaged, and not able to engage with their children at a specific level, that might be the reason why all of this work does not really translate into admission, university admission in STEM. I'll just share very, very quickly. So as well as doing the focus group, I did do some survey to get a little bit of background on the family's background and try to understand where they are coming from. So generally speaking, a huge portion of the family, the fathers were very highly educated from all of the families that I was working with. And funnily enough, majority of the parents, the mothers I was working with, their husband was we're actually doing engineering, nearly 50% of them, which I think that's again to do with maybe the science capital of the women. She's aware of it because her husband is working in this, and probably she's emigrated with him so that he can continue his study in the UK to do this. Majority of the women that I was working with were house moms, looking after the children, and yeah. So in terms of the perception of what jobs worked better for women, I think engineering wasn't one of them at all. There were so many other careers, but engineering wasn't at all one of them. And again, the point around allowing a flexible job that would allow women to come back to the workplace. That was one of the key drivers for the mothers on what they thought would be something that they would encourage their daughters to do in the future. Again,
Thelma, you've got about a minute left. Okay.
So just very quickly, so in terms of who is the role model or the key role model for families, most of the mothers thought it's not their responsibilities to felt they couldn't act as role models for their daughters because of the factors that I discussed before, mainly around them not having enough maybe education to do that, and all felt it was their husband's responsibility. Again, I'll share some more on this slide now. The other really interesting thing is that one of the points that came across from the research from the folks group, that because in the literature there's a lot of evidence that people from minoritized background may consider going into engineering for the financial incentives, but that wasn't the case in this study. So I then went into a second intervention, and I took the families that took part of this to the Life Science Centre in Newcastle, and we had a really wonderful day, and I did some really interesting observations on how the parents engage with their children, but I won't bore you with the details. And that's them in the science theatre, which was very interesting to watch. I also sent them activities which they could do at home, using resources from home, and crossword puzzles and things like that, which they can do at home. And I was really surprised how creative the mothers were. One was around solar energy, and the other one was around wind turbine. And finally, I sent them small kits that they could build at home based on their ages, and the mothers build them with their children and send it back to me. And I'm sorry, I'm 1 minute over time, I think. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Selma. We got time. Anybody got a question? Oh, Keely again.
I'm sorry, but it's amazing. Selma, that was brilliant. You know, you've got so much insights in there. Did you actually write it up and publish that?
Not really, no. I meant to, but yeah, but I haven't got around to do that, yeah.
Okay, no, I think it's just really, really good. I was really fascinated by the data that you collected, and it was such useful insights. So thank you. I think that will help everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Selma. That was really great. Thank you. I think we've just got a 5-minute break now. So,
Becky, there's one question. Can we accommodate one question from the audience?
oh, great. Okay, yeah.
One of them is asking, I believe the root cause of leaking pipeline and not enough women in STEM is home. The way they're bringing up doll for girls and tools for boys aren't added value and has to be changed. That's from Mihak. Thank you, Mihak.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's so much a question as, yeah, a comment, really. Yeah.
It is more like a comment. Yeah, thanks for the input, Mihak.
Yeah, okay. All right, so if we can take a quick break. That's okay. All right, so we'll see you all shortly. So I think it's 2:45, so I think we should make a start. So welcome back, everyone. In the second part of the agenda, we've got Joe, who's going to take us through a practical activity. Then we're going to move on to Annabelle and Keely to talk about their work. And then we'll move into a sort of open discussion and Padlet session. I'll pass you over to Joe.
Hi again, everybody. I'm going to keep this a bit shorter, Becky, if that's okay. I'm just conscious that other people have far more interesting things to say than I in these next 5 minutes, and I'm keen that people are able to hear those. The STEM Person of the Week resource that I mentioned briefly, I'm going to give us a little bit of activity, just a few minutes to think about a resource that we've created and how it might relate to your work, and a bit of opportunity to think about some skills that you might have within your roles, and how you might share those with young people that you work with. So I'll go for a screen share again, and if someone can give me a nod that they can see that, I think they can. So as I mentioned, our STEM Person of the Week activity showcases working scientists from a diverse group of people. So that could be gender, that could be race, that could be diversity in terms of the actual jobs as well. We're quite broad on them. And we showcase across those 15 different attributes. And what we find is, and what we've purposely done in this resource is removed attributes that are around intelligence. Because when we ask children, what does it take to be a scientist, or what are scientists? One of the well, in fact, from our research, one of the highest things they say is intelligence, and particularly high levels of intelligence. And we think that although, yes, you need to be clever to be a scientist, there are things that are more important in terms of the skills that you need. I know lots of working scientists, they are not all your Einstein geniuses. They're just people who found a passion in doing something they love and worked really hard at being clever at it. And removing this idea of innate cleverness is part of this particular resource. So we look at other skills, we look at skills that children already have, which you can see on this page here, these 15 skills. So what I'd like you to do is have a think, and I don't know how to do this, maybe put this in the chat, but I'm not sure if you can access the chat, maybe put this in the Q&A bit. Think about your work and your job. So the day-to-day STEM work that you do. What would be the most important skill that you think you had? And if you could put it in there and kind of give us an answer, an idea as to why you think that's a skill. So for example, Farnoosh, who works at Northumbria, she's a mechanical engineer. And one of the skills that she highlighted and been really important for her work is that she has to keep track of a wide range of projects. So being organized is really important to her. And she's really interested in really keen on creating new engineering solutions that help people in the world. So she feels that she has to be committed in order to do that. So I'd like you to have a think about your particular role, whatever that is, whatever you class your job title as. And I think that can be quite challenging sometimes to decide what your job title actually is. But if you could write down what skill of the ones that you see on the screen do you think is most relevant to you? Because what we're trying to do with our work is show the children in front of us they already have these skills. They have these skills in abundance, so they can see they are already like people who work in STEM. I think if I can see, yeah. So brilliant. Thank you, Nagam, for hard working. If anybody wants to add a little bit in terms of the reason why, creative. That's a really good one as well. That's one that when we ask children about what skills they have, it's one that's not mentioned very often, actually. And if anybody else has any they'd like to share. There's lots of things like people are typing answers to questions. Oh, it's disappearing. Mehak, thank you. Communicator, self-motivated, hardworking. So it's just something to think about when if you're out there kind of working with schools, you're working with young people, and you want to kind of show them what you need to do in order to do these jobs. It's not just about subject knowledge. There are a lot of these other very, very important skills, which are really important because they're things that the children already have. in some form or another. Now, people might think they are more one than the other, but you can start to draw out parallels between the thing you do, which can sometimes seem so incredibly far from the classroom, to actually, well, I do this and I'm creative. Are you creative? Well, there you go. There's already something that's similar between the two of us. I'll pause there. It's worth having a think about, and the links I've shared from before has some of this work in there, and some of that I've got links from our website that shows you some of these resources, so you can take a look at in your own time. I'll stop there. I hope that's okay, Becky. You're muted, Becky.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Joe. I think people have put replies in as well as new questions, so there is quite a bit in the chat about what we've done. And it's quite interesting to see that everybody's chosen something slightly different, actually. So we all have our own thoughts about that. But I think STEM Person of the Week has been quite good for just exploring with children different attributes and how, you know, science and STEM and technology and engineering can be for everyone. So I think it's been a really useful resource. There are loads of sets of these, aren't there, Joe, on the NU STEM website if people do want to use or
more than you would ever want to read. They are all quite interesting. So I don't know what the best way of getting kind of links across to everybody is. I'll share my presentation with Becky and then that can go around. But yeah, do have a look. There's some interesting stuff. And give us a shout if you want to talk about any of it further. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to pass over to Annabelle and Keely. I don't know who's going first, but they've tell me they've timed this for 5 minutes each, so we'll see.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So first of all, a little introduction. My name is Keely Crockett. I'm at Manchester Met, and I guess really that I always start off when I do my STEM activities telling people about me with loads of very random pictures there. So for example, we've got some chickens. I like to bake, and having a son who's now 14 meant I spent a lot of time doing everything conceivable on Minecraft possible. But it's also to connect really and say that, you know, I was brought up in Manchester in a newsagent, so I was always up at 4:30 a.m. in the morning, and you know, it was part of our lives. I live in the Yorkshire Dales, and I also have a Disney Spirit Award, one thing that's kind of people don't really know about me. So what I'm going to share with you is some of the work that I do in primary schools at the moment, and I think it's a lot of it is trial and error, as you'll see. So I tend to go into rural primary schools, which also have a big problem because classes are actually grouped together. It's quite normal for 3-year groups to be in one area. There is not usually a dedicated ICT teacher in there as well. And a lot of things are crammed into sessions. So to get an hour a week and actually go in and do something exciting with children is really, really good and helps them when they go to secondary school. Okay, so what do I do? Some of the things I do is pixel art. So I think spreadsheets are a really, really useful thing to do, not just learning the skills of columns and cells and putting data in and doing charts and simple sums, but actually by learning how to use them in art. So bridging the curriculum there between spreadsheets and doing pictures and kind of bringing in map reading. So we're bringing in lots of different curriculum areas into one. I also do a Harriet the Hacker, which I change, where they have to tell a story by locating the cells. And again, when children are sort of like 6 and 7, this tends to work really well because they have a race to see if they can find out where the hacker is and where the bad person is. But then building up on the Excel stuff, what we also do is we get them to budget their own class party, which I usually get towards the end of term. So what I do is I provide them with all the latest prices from a number of different supermarkets. They look at the items and they have to make decisions about what kinds of food they have. We also bring in inclusivity and diversity in there because obviously some people may have some dietary requirements that we need to consider. But do they go for, like, for example, fancy plates that are plastic that need to be thrown away, or do they say, no, we're going to have better, healthier food and use the school plates? So it's about teamwork, working together. And I tend to do this in mixed groups. So we're looking at ages 7 to 10 to do that. But they really enjoy it. And again, I use the Kahoot quiz when we actually do the party the week after. So it ties everything in. Moving on, coding. I guess coding is the most typical thing that people do at primary schools in terms of STEM outreach. So I do a bit with Key Stage 1. Now, again, this is a really, really interesting group where I am because we go down to 4 and 5. We also have some nursery children in there in some of the classes. So I do find that Scratch Junior on iPads is really, really useful. And even at that age, they're really good at breaking down a problem and following instructions. We also have at MMU a series of Sphero robots, and the ability to actually navigate a robot around a maze using the controller software, again on an iPad, is also really, really good for them because they have to kind of problem solve and learn. Sometimes we do a tiny bit of coding in Key Stage 1, but more and often it happens in Key Stage 2. And I'm pretty sure most people on this call will know about Scratch. One of the challenges, of course, is in primary schools, particularly due to safeguarding, where I am, they can have no online accounts whatsoever. So I either set up an account that I have and we all save to it, or they download onto their own machines, which was a series of laptops. But again, sometimes the tutorials are too challenging for that group. So I do kind of adapt them and print challenge sheets out where I break down the problem of what we're going to code. We do lots of things as well without machines in terms of algorithm development. So how do you build a snowman? Lots of little post-it notes and pictures where they have to put them in a certain order. Yeah. Making a sandwich. And we also do as well. One of the things I found out is, and we'll probably all know this as well, that boys tend to really want to do more of this than girls, right? So this is an interesting one. So the idea is what I've done is change the kind of topics we're programming. Yes, there is the traditional games, but what Scratch is good at is doing storytelling, animation, and again, linking into different aspects of the curriculum. And for everybody else out there, Hour of Code sessions, really, really useful resource to use. You can actually extend around them. So nearly done. The other thing that I'm really passionate about, so my field is in computational intelligence and AI, and I'm really looking at trialing lots of AI stuff for this Key Stage 2 group. What I've used a lot this term, which is quite interesting, is AI and oceans. It is part of the Hour of Code, but you can actually take it in lots of different directions. So I've run some really good sessions where it's brought in ideas of not just how AI learns, but also ethics and bias and the consequences of making decision. So for example, here, what they have to do is build an AI detector that first of all distinguishes fish and plastics. But what happens over the course of the activity is they'll end up picking grumpy fish or happy fish. Sounds a bit silly, but it really works. And it starts to introduce that concept of bias. The other work we've done is also in trying to teach artificial neural networks to this particular age group as well. We have done some activities at science festivals where we basically get them to build the neurons with pipe cleaners. We had little labels on them so they can put their favorite memory on this. But we can also bring in things like the use of robotic pets to support dementia, because we can illustrate with this really complicated kind of neural network that you can see on here, how neurons can actually, I'm not going to say the word fail, but I'll just say it because time's short, and memories can disconnect. So it's kind of like bringing all these disciplines together. Last thing now, within IEEE, within the Computational Intelligence Society, there is a program for this age group, so I'm slightly going more into Annabelle's area now. But what we do is we take more high-level concepts and try and do international high school lecture series. And again, there's lots of YouTube links where people within the society have tried to take really difficult concepts such as fuzzy logic, which is an extension of set theory, and say, okay, how do we make this fuzzy and what does it actually mean? So yeah, that's all new from last year. I don't lead this, but I'm just part of it. And it's really interesting to see how it changes how you communicate. So lastly, Coding, I still think it's really, really fundamental at primary schools because it's all about the problem solving and decomposition. I think it's really good. I tend to do things in groups so we get confidence, and there's a really lot of strong girl groups working together, but also mixed groups, because of course diversity is the best way to get good solutions. AI, I am so passionate about getting AI and ethics into primary school education as well as secondary school. So again, lots of conversations around that and how we can actually do this and make it wider than things that I'm doing and other people are doing. And telling people about data, just getting that awareness level up. I'm hoping that when we go in and we do these kinds of activities, we're doing it because we're trying to inspire people to say, hey, I'm just an ordinary person, I'm female, but I'm working in this area. Right, and I'm going to hand over to Annabelle.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Hopefully, there we are. So, can you see my screen? Can somebody nod? Yay. Okay. I never use this slide, by the way, when I'm doing talks to secondary school. So I'm just going to reflect on some of the stuff I've done with secondary school children. Most of my work is with secondary school children that's in the school rather than at science festivals. I'm based at Manchester Met University, and up until December I was the chair of Women in Engineering, which was great, but I've always done quite a lot of work talking to people about computer science because I do believe it's amazing and everyone should agree. So the slide that I actually use in schools is something like this. So it's quite a challenge I have found talking to big groups at secondary schools. It's okay if it's an optional thing that I'm doing. So I'm going to just, I always start off anyway talking about who I am, where I grew up, what I do, because I think being a human is really important to try and get a connection, and it is a challenge. I'm not going to do that now because of time, but I will show you a slide that I often use a bit later about my career, which is usually quite effective. So some of the activities that I have done in secondary school with varying levels of success, this is usually based upon what the school wants me to do. So it's not kind of after school program, it's kind of going in and doing some sort of talk usually, or event for the school that they want to do at that particular time. Assembly talks I've done to, lots of kids with several different year groups in. I've done them for Science Week, I've done them for Women in Engineering Week, I've done them for International Women's Day, this kind of thing, talking about computing and AI. It's very challenging. Very difficult to get anyone to ask questions, very difficult to be interactive with a big group. I've also done careers talks, which are for people who sign up, and they have been much more interactive, and people have been comfortable asking questions, and really challenging questions actually, which is also really interesting. I've done practice interviews where we go along and people sign up, they do a CV and you interview them and talk, and they're usually very nervous, terrified, I would say. They've never done anything like that before. They may not have ever met anyone working in a science job before. And so that's actually about building confidence and getting out of them what their skills are and what they're interested in. And they're normally trying to assign, people who are interested in computing careers, for example, to computing people, etc. So that's actually really interesting, and it's quite a good way of building confidence and giving them some kind of practice. I've done career speed dating, so where whole year groups have been sent in and kind of got to move around tables, and you sit there with careers in computing and AI, particularly for me, and they sit and they ask you a few questions and you answer the questions, and it's kind of like you get 5 minutes chat, and they all move around the room. Exhausting, but actually quite nice. Because it's a whole year group and there wasn't kind of optionality there, you get a mixed level of interest, let's put it that way. I've done computing and AI workshop for school science ambassadors. Again, those are very interested people and they've really enjoyed it. I usually take in a couple of IEEE magazines, which the teachers love actually, but you get asked all manner of questions, a lot of which I can't really answer, but I can give an opinion on, and really, it really works pretty well actually at boosting their kind of interest and comments and confidence. And then I've done AI research talks, again for a sign up, and it's kind of really because people are interested in AI, so that's why I do it. And I talk about all kinds of different ideas that can be done and that are being done and that are interesting ways of solving big problems. The time has gone off my screen, so do show when I'm way over. So I've put some of them on the happy sun side and some of them on the cloud. And as I've kind of just already said, basically, is the things that have really worked have been the things where people have an option and they choose to do it. I don't think that's necessarily a don't do the big stuff, because I think it's really important for those to reach those people that haven't signed up, that aren't motivated or don't think it's for them. But I have struggled a lot with the assembly talks I've done. I've tried lots of different things and I have not managed to crack it. So there we are. So I think in summary, how successful it is, it's about the motivation. So do they want to be there, or do they kind of have to be there on one-to-one where they have to be there? Like the dating, it's worked okay, but I guess where they've got peers kind of looking at them, then they're maybe more self-conscious and won't ask or answer questions. In my experience, this is, and I'd love to learn from others who've got things that do work in assemblies, because it's got to be something. Okay, so does it sound fun is another thing that's kind of helped it work. So if I've been able to give things my own title, I've kind of come up with, I don't know, computer science rules the world, or, you know, AI, from software development to AI, and different kind of things that I think might work. Otherwise, if I'm kind of put into some situation where a title has been given, it tends to not be as fun sounding in my experience. Okay, right. So one thing I'm really passionate about talking about when I talk to secondary school kids is my career path. And this is because I feel they are put under a huge amount of pressure to make decisions about their careers aged kind of 13, where they start choosing their options and things they want to do. And then they think, oh, I can't do that now because I didn't choose X, Y, Z when I was this age. And so I think it's really important to tell them that my career path has been all over the place, that you don't have to decide up front. And if you change your mind, you can always do things to get onto that kind of career if you want to. So not to kind of put that huge pressure. If I make a mistake now, my whole life is ruined type situation. I've had teenagers and can get into that situation. So I always like to give this crazy diagram about how I actually came to be a lecturer in computer science. I'm not going to talk through it, and it's got loads of animations, so I'm going to zoom through. But basically, I talk about my life. I was brought up overseas, then I went to study computer science. Then I worked in lots of little companies, and I talk about what I did. Then I had one child, one son. Then I came to work at MMU. Then I had a little girl. Then I decided to leave my job and become a student at MMU and to do a PhD so that I could become a computer science lecturer, because I just decided that's what I wanted to do. I had two very young kids. I threw away my kind of years of work experience, sort of, yeah, took the plunge. And then I went off to work at the University of Liverpool, and then eventually, finally, I got this job, which I've been doing for over 10 years and I love. So I think that's, I mean, I obviously spend a lot more time on it, but I think it's kind of like a permission to to make a choice and change your mind, which I think is kind of lacking a little bit, and people feel a lot under pressure. I talk about things like working for a software house, and I put kind of cool pictures in, and then I actually talk about what that means to them. And then I do things like this where I say, well, it's not just programming, actually there's tons of other jobs that you have to do. And then I'm not going to go through it now, but I put up various pictures, and we talk about the different things that actually you need to do in computing if you're working in software. You don't just have to be good at programming and sitting in front of a computer. And then I also give talks about AI research, and I just talk about the stuff that I've done, the stuff that I know other people do, and other ideas. And I get absolutely loads of questions on this. Some of them really interesting, things like, do you have to do a computer science degree if you want to do AI research? You know, things that just didn't occur to me, I suppose. But, you know, I'm like, absolutely not. You can do whatever. You can move into this from lots of different angles, and it opens a really interesting discussion. So I guess the problem is it's not scalable. So the stuff that I found that works is smaller groups where they are interested. I've also done stuff online with Q&A, and where there's been quite a lot of them and they are a sign up, that has worked. But most of it, I kind of go and stand in front of them and say, this is me, this is what I do, and I get asked questions. And I haven't found a way to make assembly talks work, but I'm very happy to hear other people who have. Hopefully I have been okay on time. I'm just sharing, like I say, my experience of stuff that I've done and what did and didn't work. But I'm by no way saying I'm an expert. I've just done a lot of talks.
Thanks a lot, Annabelle and Keely. That was great. Do we have any questions for Annabelle or Keely? Keely, you obviously can't ask a question of yourself. Or any thoughts on how to do assemblies? Something I know we've tried, Annabelle, with NU STEM is getting the students to pose questions first. So I'll send you the process they go through, but they introduce you first before you go in, and then the kids send questions and you answer the questions in the assembly. And that sort of seems to get better engagement from the kids, because they've got some buy-in to that assembly rather than it just being this person that comes in and do stuff. But I think there's a secondary. Yeah, they've done it in both, in secondary and primary. So I'll just send you, I think they've got a resource on it when I find it, and I'll send it through. Yeah, because in primary, they're all really excitable and interested. just the thing about secondary. Sorry. Okay. Have we got any questions or not? I think they're all from before, aren't they? Yeah. Okay.
Salma.
I just want to add a point. I really love the authenticity that Kaylee and Annabelle shared, and I think that's a really key thing in outreach work, because it's breaking this stereotypical ideas of who STEM people are and how they look like. And I loved how you shared your career journey, Annabelle. I think that's really interesting, and it definitely gave me some inputs, as someone who's junior to you, so I can see insights to that for younger generations. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today as well.
Okay, I think that's great. So the last part of the session was just to really have a general open chat with people who are on the call today, and to just see where your main challenges are, and what solutions you can offer, and therefore, and also what support you might want going forward. So I've done a little Padlet, and I'm not sure whether people can see it or not, but I'll post it again. I'm hoping everybody can see that link and go into it, and then I'll open it up, and you can, for those who haven't used Padlet before, it's basically an online note area. So you can just put post notes up and generate your own post notes and add it. So I'll share my screen to that. I've lost the share screen thing now. Okay. So hopefully when you click on that link, you should be able to see that Padlet. And I just thought if we started on the left-hand side and just spent a few minutes before the end of the session talking about your main challenges. Like Annabelle said, for her, one of the challenges is how do you do really effective assemblies? But what are the other challenges or needs that people have got? And you can just click below on that plus sign here, like that, and then it will bring up an area and you'll be able to write into it. people managing to get into the Padlet okay?
Yep.
Great. Please just feel free to publish those up. If anybody's having trouble getting in, you can obviously put it in the question and answers as well.
Becky, there's a couple come up on my one that's not come up on there.
Oh, right, okay.
Just so that you know.
Ah, because I have to refresh it. Yeah, so has that come up for everyone now? Yeah.
Yeah. Refresh.
Okay, so yeah, maybe we do have to keep refreshing to get them to come up, which is a bit odd. Not had that before. But somebody's put how to know the impact of the delivered workshops. So I think we could just, go down these and just have a quick chat about them. Yeah, what Joe talked about with the NU STEM was some of the work we've done in NU STEM was looking at how you look at the impact of delivered workshops. And we did go through quite a sort of rigorous process of looking at really what were we hoping to achieve by each workshop. So was it about getting students more enthused about science? Was it more about them knowing more about careers? Was it that they understood some of the terms? So there was a series of workshops we did where there was sort of three things we wanted to come out from it. One was that they learned more about some of the terminology and could understand it more. One was that they understood what the career itself meant. And some of it was that they actually had some practical application of that. And we ended up doing a sort of evaluation that allowed us to evaluate all those different elements. So I think knowing the impact, you have to think through what impact you really want. Is it full career knowledge? Is it that they're getting interested? I don't know whether anybody else wants to add in from the panel to any of the other challenges on there. Okay, I think if you're just going in and trying stuff, somebody put if you're trying to evaluate in primary schools and not part of a research project, you're just going in and trying stuff. You can just get the children to do a very simple exercise as you go out, saying what did they like most about it and what do they think was useful coming out of it. So we've had them draw pictures of how they feel actually and just do that on post-its and leave those for us in some of the primary school workshops.
No, Becky, that was me who posted that. And the reason why I think it's a challenge is, and if you're evaluating anybody and you're collecting anything like official, you've got all the consent and everything, and then it kind of takes it out of actually what you're trying to do, isn't it? Because you're not using it as research data. I find that quite challenging. So that's a good idea. Post-it notes of how do you feel?
Yeah, and you can get them to draw or anything. Keely, we've done. We've found some quite nice pictures. They're quite good at doing happy pictures. Somebody's put something on there about funding, and I think funding in this area is always a bit difficult because it falls between some of the research council funding, really. But I know in NU STEM we've been quite successful at getting some of the public engagement funding, because some of the research councils do public engagement funding. It's not massive amounts of money. And then some of the charities. So we've had one particularly in the northeast, which was an industrial foundation, charity foundation, and they were very keen to support more women into STEM in the local area. So they've funded us actually probably to the tune of a couple of $100 grand over the years. They tend to give us about 50 to 100K all the time. So I think some of the charities are quite useful for this area. Whether anybody else has had success Keely, you've had funding recently, haven't you?
Yeah. So I got EPSRC council funding for a project that is literally about public engagement, but it's kind of like with marginalized communities. It's not necessarily on younger people. So you're looking at 18 and above, but that was a good chunk of funding. Over 280,000, so that's good. I'm just saying that because, you know, it is out there. But Annabelle, you should say this, and I, even though again not young people, Annabelle, do you want to say about the Turing Public Engagement Fund? Because that,
yeah, I mean, we just got some funding. It was only £10,000 for a really short project, but again, that was public engagement funding for trying to build public trust, awareness of AI, that sort of thing. But we've been working with traditionally marginalized communities in Greater Manchester on that to try and make a difference. But again, it wasn't schools based. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move along into the middle one because I'm conscious of time. So under practice, somebody's put innovation is very useful. Would somebody like to explain that? Is there somebody on the call? Do I have to promote them to be able to talk, maybe? Anybody know what Technovation is? No. The STEM Ambassador Hub, yeah, that's really useful. So that comes out of STEM Learning, based at York, and has lots of resources and lots of support and development too. And then somebody else has put about talking with young females in secondary primary school about career paths.
can I just ask a question? Because somebody underneath that has put on about the hands-on electronics. Now, years and years ago, Annabelle and I were part of an IEEE UKI day when we went to London, didn't we? Were you with me on that one? Yeah. Oh no, we went there, but there was some people from the STEM area who had these fantastic electronic kits. I mean, it was so good that I actually went home and got one for my son who was 5 for Christmas, even though it's 8 and upwards. And it's them kind of resources that would be really fab if there was some kind of fund. But then obviously there's lots of us all the way around the country, and we can't post things to each other. But I do think that hands-on stuff has been lost a bit due to moving online. But I love that idea. Really thought it was good.
Yeah, and the NU STEM do loan boxes to the schools actually. So we've got several loan boxes now we've put together. So schools can loan them for like a half term, and then they bring them back, and then another school can have them for half a term. So they go out in and out of classes quite regularly. They have a bit of a mix of some hands-on stuff, but they've also got career information in there too. So we always link back to the careers. But they've been quite well received, I think, by schools to do some of the more specialist stuff that they find difficult to resource. So that's been quite useful. Yeah. Okay. And then the last section we're looking at is, you know, has this event been useful? You know, are there other events you'd like to see? Are there resources you'd like us to put together or share or think that would be useful? So what support and events do you think IEEE UK, Women in Engineering in particular, and others can do to really support this area of work and STEM outreach in schools and the wider community? So we've got one comment in there, I think, already. Let me just refresh. Anything else coming in? Padlet needs refreshing.
I was just thinking, you know, based upon what the ideas that have come through, Becky, from Northumbria, it'd be really, I don't know whether again we could do this, but it would be really good if we could, I don't want to do video talks, right? But if we could do like live talks in schools where we got people together, anybody on this call, anybody who's joined, to do exactly what you've done, tell them about your job. And then get the children to use some of the resources you've posted to chat about it. And then we could cover a wide range of it. So yeah, I know it's time, but I love that idea.
Yeah, no, thanks, Keely. That's great. And thanks for the very nice feedback. Somebody said the talks have been fantastic. So the Padlet will stay open. I won't shut it down. So if people want to add anything, if they reflect over time. I think that's fine. I will stop sharing now, but are there any last thoughts or questions that anybody has before we finish? Because we're just at 25. So, any last thoughts? Anybody want to raise their hand and ask anything? I think I can promote you to talk if you raise your hand, she says optimistically.
I just want to say I've really enjoyed learning all this stuff, and it's been fantastic range of stuff. So thank you for organising it, Becky. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for participating. And on that note, I shall say bye and have a good evening. And thanks so much, everyone, for being part of it. It's been really
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you.
All right. Okay,
Bye.
thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.